welcome to the deep dive. We've got a really interesting report to dig into today. It's all about how we might stop an alien invasion, covering those first warning signs, and how we actually survive in the long run.
Absolutely. And the thing that jumped out at me right away was just how in-depth this report gets. It's not just the usual sci-fi stuff.
Right.
It dives into some really complex stuff, from psychological tactics to the whole diplomacy thing, all within this big picture of, potential conflict.
Yeah, it's a really multifaceted look at this hypothetical but pretty huge challenge.
Definitely.
So think of this deep dive like a personal briefing. We're going to explore all these different invasion scenarios they've come up with and the really detailed defense strategies. And by the end, hopefully you'll feel informed, maybe even a bit more prepared, even though, let's face it, we all hope this stays purely in the realm of imagination, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's unpack this thing. Phase 1, early detection and preparation.
Yeah.
What really struck me here was how much emphasis they put on spotting trouble early on.
Yeah, and what's interesting is they're not just talking about small improvements. It's like they're calling for a massive upgrade to our space surveillance.
Like a whole new level of watching, right?
Exactly.
Like imagine this network of super advanced telescopes and deep space radar constantly scanning the entire cosmos.
Yeah, and it's not just about seeing things. They specifically talk about these AI-powered early warning systems. Systems designed to analyze just mountains of data.
So it makes you wonder, what kind of data are they looking for beyond just, seeing a spaceship, right? I mean, are they talking about anomalies and gravitational waves or weird particle emissions?
That's a really good point. It seems like these AI systems wouldn't just be looking for, a physical object.
Right.
They'd be designed to pick up on anything that's out of the ordinary, like unusual energy fluctuations, weird shifts in the orbits of stars and planets, even patterns in electromagnetic signals that just don't make sense naturally.
It's about spotting the artificial, the things that just shouldn't be there.
Exactly. Like anything that screams, hey, something's not right here.
Right. And to actually build and run something like that sounds massive, which brings us to this next point, international cooperation. They really hammer home the need for everyone to work together right from the start.
Yeah, it's interesting how they specifically list agencies like NASA, ESA, all the big players, ISRO, CNSA, Roscosmos.
It seems like global effort is crucial even before we have a clue what we're dealing with.
I think it reflects this idea that an alien invasion wouldn't just target one country, right?
It's an everyone problem.
It's a human problem. So everyone needs to pool resources, share intel, and work together from the get-go.
Makes sense. Okay, so beyond just watching and listening, they then lay out these proactive steps, things we can do to strengthen our defenses before any actual contact.
Right.
And this is where they get into some really cool ideas, starting with advanced weaponry.
This is where it gets fun.
We're not talking about just bigger bombs here. They talk about investing in directed energy weapons.
Oh, yeah.
Things like lasers, railguns, plasma weapons. So what's the advantage of that kind of tech in a fight against, aliens?
Well, one of the big things with these directed energy weapons is their speed and precision. Think about lasers. They travel at the speed of light.
That's fast.
And railguns use these electromagnetic fields to launch projectiles at crazy speeds, like miles per second. And then there's plasma weapons, which can deliver these concentrated bursts of superheated matter.
So imagine you're in a space battle, or even a fight in the atmosphere.
Right.
You need something that can intercept these fast-moving alien craft, disable their tech, all from a safe distance. That's where these things come in.
Absolutely, but there are challenges too.
Right.
Like with lasers, it's not just about power.
Sure.
It's about maintaining that focus over long distances, maybe through atmospheric distortion or even against alien defenses.
Right, like they might have some countermeasures.
Exactly.
And then it gets even wilder. They introduce this idea of setting up planetary defense bases, like fallback positions, on the Moon and Mars. Now, this sounds like pure science fiction, but they're presenting it as a serious option. So what would it take to actually do that in terms of resources and people, and what kind of invasion scenarios make those locations so important strategically?
This ties into the whole idea of survival long term.
Right.
Setting up these bases on the Moon or Mars would be ridiculously complex and expensive.
Oh, yeah.
It would require these huge leaps forward in space travel, how we build habitats, how we get resources. But imagine if Earth became uninhabitable.
Yeah.
These bases could become essential.
Like a backup plan.
Exactly, a haven for humanity.
Right.
Maybe even a staging ground for a counteroffensive. And they could also be used to store vital knowledge and resources, just in case.
It's a super ambitious vision. Okay, now, shifting gears a bit, the report also talked about how vulnerable our digital infrastructure is. So it's not just about physical attacks they're worried about. They're also thinking about the possibility of alien hacking.
It's a good point. When you think about how much our world relies on these digital
It's
systems.
everything, right?
Yeah, and what would happen if a major cyber attack, alien or not, took them all down?
It's a scary thought.
It is, and the report dives into this idea that a technologically advanced alien civilization might see our digital networks as a way to cause chaos.
Right.
Imagine if they could shut down our power grids, our financial systems, or even our military communications all remotely.
Yeah, that's a pretty chilling scenario. And to protect against that, they suggest these really advanced cybersecurity measures like quantum encryption and AI-driven cyber defense. So how are these different from what we have now, and why are they so important if we're going up against a much more advanced adversary?
Well, quantum encryption is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's potentially unbreakable.
Really?
It uses these principles from quantum mechanics to ensure that any attempt to intercept a message would immediately change the message itself, basically alerting everyone.
So it's like an alarm built into the communication itself.
Exactly. And then AI-driven cyber defense, this takes what we already do to a whole new level. It uses AI to learn patterns, spot anomalies, and respond to threats, all in real time.
So it's constantly adapting.
Exactly. Way faster than our current methods. And against, a potentially super intelligent alien force, these advanced techniques could be vital.
It's like we're entering a whole new era of cybersecurity.
We might have to.
Okay, so we've covered detecting the threat and getting our defenses ready. Now the report moves into phase 2, first contact and diplomacy. And right away they make this really important point. Don't assume first contact will be hostile.
It's a good point, a sign of strategic thinking.
Right.
They acknowledge that we might have a peaceful encounter, and they even outline a framework for potential diplomacy.
And at the center of that is this suggestion of forming a global governing body, specifically referencing the UN, to handle any negotiations with aliens. It's like they're saying humanity needs one voice.
Makes sense.
But what are the challenges in setting up such a body, especially with all the pressure of an alien contact situation? How do you ensure it's seen as legitimate by every nation?
That's a huge question, even without aliens in the picture.
Right.
Creating a truly unified global government with the power to speak for everyone would be unbelievably difficult. Think about all the political differences, the competing national interests, and then add in the pressure of first contact. It would be incredibly complex.
A massive diplomatic challenge.
Yeah.
Now, let's say first contact does go peacefully. The report talks about potentially proposing an exchange of knowledge and resources with these aliens.
Right.
So what could each side realistically offer? And what are the potential benefits and risks of something like that?
Well, imagine the potential for learning from each other. We could share our understanding of biology, art, philosophy, even how we organize our societies. And they might have breakthroughs in areas where they're more advanced than us. Things like physics, engineering, medicine.
It's almost like a giant knowledge swap.
Yeah, but there are definitely risks. We need to be incredibly careful about what information we share. And introducing alien technology or biological things into our world could have unintended consequences.
Definitely some big considerations. But of course, they also prepare for the worst-case scenario, the hostile first contact. They outline all of these immediate countermeasures, which leads us to phase 3, defense strategies against different invasion methods. This is where it gets really interesting because they break down how we'd respond to all these different types of attacks. So let's start with a ground invasion. They mention using EMP weapons to take out alien tech. But what are the downsides of that? And are there ethical issues with using something like that on a planetary scale?
Well, the thing about EMP weapons is they're pretty indiscriminate.
All right, so they affect everything.
They could fry alien tech, sure, but they could also cause huge damage to our own infrastructure.
Right, like power grids, hospitals, communications.
Exactly. So there's this big concern about collateral damage and the long-term disruption it could cause.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. They also talk about building underground bunkers and military bases. How realistic is that on a large scale?
Yeah.
Could we actually protect a significant portion of the population that way?
Building enough underground shelters to house a large chunk of the world's population would be insanely difficult and expensive.
It's a huge undertaking.
You could probably harden key military and government sites, put those underground, but doing that for everyone is probably not feasible.
Right, it's just not practical. Now, they also mention using guerrilla warfare tactics. This is kind of interesting because It takes advantage of our knowledge of our own planet.
It's about using what we know best.
Hmm.
Even against a technologically superior enemy, you can use guerrilla tactics to disrupt their operations.
Right, things like hit-and-run attacks, ambushes.
Exactly. And our conventional forces would need to adapt. Think about decentralizing command, giving more initiative to smaller units, integrating those unconventional tactics.
So it's about being flexible, using our home field advantage. Now, let's move to air and space combat. They talk about developing hypersonic fighter jets with plasma shielding.
It sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Right. But they're presenting it as a real possibility.
Yeah.
So what are the limitations of that kind of tech right now?
Well, hypersonic flight, that speed's more than 5 times the speed of sound. And then plasma shielding, which basically creates this superheated layer of ionized gas to deflect weapons.
Wow.
Both of those are really difficult right now.
Right. It's pushing the limits of what we can do.
Exactly. We need some major breakthroughs in materials, propulsion systems, how we generate energy.
It's the cutting edge of aerospace engineering. Now, they also talk about using swarm drone attacks. So what are the advantages there, and how might aliens counter them?
Swarm tactics are all about overwhelming the enemy. You can flood their defenses with sheer numbers, overwhelm their targeting systems, and drones are cheaper than manned aircraft.
And you don't risk pilots.
Exactly. But a really advanced alien civilization might have ways to counter that. Think about sophisticated electronic warfare to jam the drones or take control of them. Or maybe they have their own swarms.
Like a constant back and forth.
A technological arms race.
And finally, in the air and space domain, they talk about building orbital defense stations with high-energy beam weapons.
It's like a space-based defense grid.
It's a pretty amazing concept.
Yeah.
But what are the challenges in creating something like that?
It would be a massive project. Logistically, you'd need to get all these huge structures and power sources into orbit.
Right. And then supply them, maintain them.
Exactly. And then the technology itself, building these high-energy beam weapons, the targeting systems, dealing with power generation, heat, accuracy over vast distances.
That's a level of engineering we've never even attempted before.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to something a bit more unsettling. Biological warfare. They stress the need to analyze alien biology quickly, to find weaknesses and develop countermeasures, things like vaccines. How realistic is that in the face of an active bio attack?
That would be a race against time. It would depend on how complex their biology is, how different their pathogens are from ours.
Right.
We've made great strides in biotechnology, but developing and mass-producing treatments and vaccines against something totally alien would be a huge challenge.
And they also talk about implementing full quarantine and decontamination protocols. That would be a massive global undertaking.
It would have a huge impact on everything: supply chains, travel, the economy.
Right.
And socially, imagine trying to enforce global quarantines.
Yeah.
You'd have restrictions on freedom, potential unrest, and the logistics of coordinating something like that on a global scale.
It's a pretty overwhelming thought. Okay, let's switch to the realm of AI and hacking. They suggest using AI-driven cyber attacks against alien networks, essentially turning their own potential strength against them. But how risky is that? What if we're dealing with an intelligence that's way beyond us?
That's a big unknown. We have no idea how strong their cyber defenses are, how they might retaliate.
Right.
A failed cyber attack could expose our own vulnerabilities and trigger a massive counterattack.
It's a high-stakes game.
One that could backfire spectacularly.
Now, another thing they mention is reverse engineering any captured alien technology. It's a classic sci-fi trope.
It's a way to potentially leapfrog our own technology.
Right.
Imagine the advancements we could make if we could understand their tech.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be easy. Their technology might be based on principles we haven't even discovered yet.
A massive scientific challenge. And finally, they touch on a more unconventional tactic, using misinformation campaigns to disrupt alien coordination. How effective could that really be, and what are the risks?
That's a tough one. It depends on their communication methods, whether they understand human psychology. Can they even tell what's true and what's not?
Right.
Misinformation could sow confusion, but it might be completely ineffective. It could even backfire and escalate things. It's a very unpredictable strategy.
A high-risk, high-reward kind of thing. Okay, so we've covered the immediate responses. Now the report shifts to Phase 4. Long-term survival and retaliation, thinking beyond that initial invasion. One of the key ideas here is terraforming and colonization, setting up colonies on Mars, the Moon, even space stations to ensure humanity survives. But what are the biggest challenges there, and how long would something like that realistically take?
Terraforming is a massive undertaking. We're talking about changing a planet's atmosphere, its temperature, its water. With our current technology, that could take centuries, even millennia.
Oh, that's long term.
And even setting up large, self-sustaining colonies on the moon or Mars is really hard. Think about transportation, building infrastructure, finding resources, and creating closed-loop life support systems.
So that's decades, maybe even generations of work.
It's a multi-generational project.
It's incredible to think about. They also reiterate how important it is to keep researching alien technology, to improve our defenses, maybe even develop our own offensive capabilities.
Yeah, if we want to stay ahead, we need to constantly be learning, adapting.
And then even in the worst case scenario, a full-blown occupation, they talk about forming resistance cells.
It's a grim thought, but it makes sense to think about.
Are there any historical examples that might offer lessons for something like that?
Oh, definitely. There are tons of examples of resistance movements throughout history. They offer insights into things like organization, communication, sabotage, even how to keep morale up in the darkest of times.
Right.
But fighting a technologically superior alien force would be different. We'd need to adapt and innovate.
It's a whole new kind of resistance.
Definitely.
Well, the report ends by highlighting the need for global unity, constant technological advancement, and strategic thinking if we want to face this hypothetical but potentially existential threat. It makes you stop and think, are we really prepared for something like this?
It does. It really makes you think about our place in the universe and the challenges that might be out there.
Absolutely. So from this deep dive, a few key things really stand out. First, early detection is crucial. The sooner we spot trouble, the better. Second, we need a multifaceted defense strategy covering everything from cyber to space and even diplomacy. And finally, we have to think long-term, how to ensure humanity survives, even if things go badly.
For me, the most impressive thing was how comprehensive this report is. It's not just about shooting lasers. It takes into account diplomacy, long-term survival, all these different invasion scenarios. It's a really impressive piece of strategic analysis.
Absolutely. And when you consider the level of detail in this report, it makes you wonder, what other threats might be out there that we don't even know about? And what seemingly crazy preparations might turn out to be essential for the future of humanity?
That's a good question.
Something to think about. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.